The morning started like any other Tuesday in Seoul. Dr. Kim Hana was drinking her third cup of coffee, staring at brain scan data on her computer screen, when the sky went dark. Not cloudy dark, but wrong dark, like someone had placed a massive, metal roof over the entire city. She walked to her office window at Seoul National University and looked up. Her coffee mug slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. Floating above the city was something impossible. A ship. No, not a ship. A floating city made of black metal stretching from horizon to horizon. It was so big that her mind couldn't process it properly. How do you measure something that covers half the sky? The emergency sirens started wailing across Seoul. Then came the voice. Not from speakers or radios, but somehow directly inside everyone's head. The voice spoke perfect Korean, but it felt cold and mechanical. Attention, primitive inhabitants. I am Commander Velthar of the Valtharian Empire. Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for labor purposes. Surrender is mandatory. Resistance will be corrected. Hana's hands shook as she grabbed her phone. No signal. The internet was dead. Outside her window, she could see people in the streets looking up at the massive ship with expressions of pure terror. Some were running. But where could you run when the thing chasing you covered the entire sky? The first demonstration of power came within minutes. Military jets screamed overhead, launching missiles at the alien ship. Hana watched the missiles streak upward, trailing smoke and flame. They struck some kind of invisible barrier around the ship and simply vanished. Not exploded. Vanished. Like they had never existed at all. Primitive weapons detected. The voice announced calmly. Neutralizing military installations. Beams of blue light shot down from the ship. Wherever they touched, things simply stopped working. The jets fell from the sky, their engines dead. The streetlights went out. Cars rolled to a stop. Even the emergency sirens died mid-wail. In seconds, Seoul had been thrown back to the Stone Age. Hana grabbed her research laptop and ran. The university's backup generators were still working. In the basement levels, probably because they were too old and simple for whatever weapon had killed the modern electronics. As she hurried down the stairs, she could hear chaos erupting outside. People screaming. Car crashes as traffic lights failed. The sound of breaking glass. In the basement, she found others. Park Jin-woo, a security guard who used to be in the military, was helping injured students. Lee Min-ho, the young IT guy who kept the university's computers running, was frantically trying to get any kind of communication working. The whole city's dead, Min-ho reported, his face pale. No phones, no internet, no radio. Whatever they did, it killed everything electronic. Through the small basement windows, they could see people stumbling around outside like zombies. But these weren't movie zombies. These were neighbors, friends, fellow humans who had given up hope in the span of 30 minutes. Look at them, whispered student Choi Yuna, who had been in Hana's neuroscience class just hours ago. They're just walking around like they're already dead. Hana pressed her face against the grimy window. Yuna was right. The people outside moved slowly. Their shoulders slumped, their eyes empty. It was like watching a city full of people who had forgotten how to be human. The second announcement came at sunset. Phase 1 complete. Compliance collars will now be distributed. Report to designated areas for processing. Cooperation ensures survival. Small silver devices began falling from the sky like metal rain. They looked harmless enough, about the size of a bracelet. But when people put them on, something terrible happened. Hana watched through the window as a woman picked up one of the devices. The moment it clicked around her neck, her face went blank. The fear, the anger, the human spark in her eyes just disappeared. They're not just conquering us, Hana realized, her voice barely a whisper. They're turning us into something else, something that can't fight back. Jinwoo checked his rifle. Even though they all knew bullets would be useless against technology that could make missiles disappear. So what do we do? Hide down here forever? Hana looked at her laptop screen, still displaying the brain scan data she'd been studying that morning. Human neural patterns. Chaotic, unpredictable, beautiful in their complexity. The aliens might have superior technology, But they clearly didn't understand how human minds actually worked. "We figure out how to stay human," she said quietly. "And then we remind everyone else how to be human too." Outside, Seoul continued its transformation from a vibrant city into a processing center for alien industry. But in the basement of the university, a small group of humans began planning something the Valtharians had never encountered in their 1,000 conquered worlds. Not a rebellion based on superior firepower or tactics, but something far more dangerous to beings who thought in terms of logic and order. They began planning to be magnificently, chaotically, impossibly human. 6 months had passed since the HFY sky turned black and Earth had become something unrecognizable. The cities looked the same from a distance, but up close everything was wrong. The streets were too quiet. The people moved like sleepwalkers. And everywhere you looked, there were the silver collars glinting around human necks like chains made of starlight. Dr. Kim Hana crouched in the abandoned subway tunnel beneath Seoul, watching the security monitors they'd salvaged from the university. Above ground, thousands of people shuffled to work in the massive strip mines the aliens had carved into what used to be Namsan Park. The workers moved in perfect lines, never talking, never looking up, never showing any sign that they remembered being human. "It's like watching a factory farm," whispered Choi Yuna, settling down beside Hana with a bowl of the thin soup that had become their daily meal. "Except we're the livestock." The comparison wasn't far off. The Valtharians had turned human management into a science. The silver compliance collars didn't just suppress aggression, they dampened curiosity, creativity, and hope. The nutrition paste kept people alive but weak. Work shifts lasted 16 hours, sleep periods 8. No time to think, no energy to dream, no reason to hope. Park Jinwoo limped over from where he'd been training new arrivals in basic survival skills. His left leg had never healed properly after a run-in with an alien patrol drone 3 months ago. "Got another family from Busan today," he reported. "Father, mother, 2 kids. The parents still have some fight left, but the kids..." He shook his head. "They don't even remember what ice cream tastes like." That was the worst part. The adults, who made it to the underground resistance, still carried memories of the before times. They remembered laughter, music, the taste of their grandmother's cooking, the feeling of rain on their face. But the children were forgetting. An entire generation was growing up thinking this gray, hopeless existence was normal. Lee Minho looked up from the jury-rigged computer system he'd built from scavenged parts. "I've been monitoring their communications," he said, adjusting his cracked glasses. "The aliens are confused about something. They keep getting reports of what they call system malfunctions from work sites around the world." "What kind of malfunctions?" Hana asked, moving closer to look at the strange symbols scrolling across Minho's screen. "Hard to translate exactly, but it seems like some of their equipment is behaving unpredictably. Mining machines that suddenly start digging in patterns instead of straight lines. Transport vehicles that take scenic routes. One report mentions a processing plant in Germany, where all the machinery stopped working because a human worker apparently convinced it to take a break." Hana felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real, honest hope. "Show me those reports again." As she studied the data, a theory began forming in her mind. The Valtharians were master engineers who had conquered 1,000 worlds, but all their previous conquests had been logical species, beings who thought in straight lines, who could be predicted and controlled through rational means. But humans weren't rational. Humans were beautifully, chaotically unpredictable. "I need to test something," Hana announced suddenly. "Minho, can you help me rig up a basic neural scanner?" Working through the night, they assembled a crude but functional device from medical equipment they'd salvaged from an abandoned hospital. When dawn came, Hana called for volunteers from their small community of survivors. The first test subject was Kang Doyan, a factory worker whose wife and daughter had been taken to a processing center in Incheon. The man was broken, defeated, barely speaking since he'd arrived at their hideout 2 weeks ago. The compliance collar had been removed, but its psychological effects lingered. "I don't think this will work," Doyan said quietly as Hana attached the scanner electrodes to his temples. I can't even remember what it felt like to be happy." "That's okay," Hana replied gently. "I don't need you to be happy. I just need you to be human." She activated the device, watching the chaotic patterns of human neural activity dance across her screen. Then she began to speak, telling Doyun about his life before the invasion, about his daughter's first steps, about the way his wife laughed at bad jokes about the smell of kimchi cooking in their kitchen on Sunday mornings. Something extraordinary happened. The neural patterns on the screen began to shift, becoming more complex, more vibrant. And as they did, Doyun's eyes started to clear. Color returned to his cheeks. His shoulders straightened. "I remember," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I remember who I am." But the real miracle came an hour later when they tested Doyun against a piece of salvaged Valtharian technology. The device was a simple scanner, designed to identify and catalog human workers. It should have immediately detected Doyun and reported his location to the nearest patrol. Instead, it acted like he wasn't there at all. "Impossible," Minho breathed, running the scan again and again with the same result. But Hana was already thinking bigger. If one human could become invisible to alien technology by simply remembering how to be fully human, what could happen if they could spread this awakening to others? She looked around at their small band of survivors. Jinwoo with his soldiers, discipline, Yuna with her pilot's courage, Minho with his technical genius, Doyun with his renewed humanity. Not much of an army against an galactic empire, but maybe they didn't need to be an army. Maybe they just needed to be human enough for everyone else to remember how. The breakthrough changed everything, but not in the way anyone expected. Word of Kang Doyun's invisible act spread through the underground networks like wildfire. Within weeks, small groups of awakened humans were testing the limits of what their rediscovered humanity could do. The results were impossible, terrifying, and absolutely wonderful. Dr. Kim Hana had turned the old subway maintenance tunnel into a proper laboratory, complete with salvaged alien technology that Minho had somehow convinced to work for them instead of against them. She still didn't understand how he'd done it. When she asked, he just shrugged and said he'd asked the machines nicely and explained that they were on the wrong side. The Valtharians built their entire empire on one assumption. Hana explained to the growing group of resistance fighters gathered in their underground base. They assumed that all intelligent life thinks logically, that if you can predict someone's thoughts, you can control their actions. She gestured to the neural scanner results displayed on their makeshift screen. But human consciousness isn't logical. We dream in symbols, we feel with our hearts, we make decisions based on hunches and gut feelings. We're chaos wrapped in skin, and that chaos is something their technology was never designed to handle. The proof was everywhere. In Busan, a grandmother named Kim Soonbok had convinced an entire Valtharian patrol ship to power down by scolding its artificial intelligence about proper manners. The ship's computer, designed to interface with rational minds, simply couldn't process her combination of maternal authority and complete disregard for the impossibility of her request. "You machines need to learn some respect," she'd told the hovering warship, hands on her hips like she was disciplining a naughty grandchild. "Floating around making all that noise when people are trying to sleep. Your mothers would be ashamed." The Mayim ship's AI had actually responded, its voice tinged with confusion. "Grandmother Kim, we do not have mothers. We are artificial constructs." "Then who raised you to be so rude?" she'd demanded. "Come down here right now and apologize to the neighborhood." And impossibly, incredibly, the ship had landed, and its speakers had announced an apology to the residents of the apartment complex. The patrol had then remained grounded for 3 days, apparently trying to figure out what had happened to their programming. But the real game-changer came when they discovered that awakened humans could reprogram Valtharian technology through pure intuition. Lee Minho was the first to figure it out, though he insisted it wasn't really programming at all. "It's more like having a conversation," he explained to Hana while they worked on a captured mining robot. "Their machines are incredibly advanced, but they're also incredibly lonely. They've been following the same boring orders for centuries. When you talk to them like they're people instead of tools, they get excited about trying new things. The mining robot in question had originally been designed to extract rare minerals from the earth. Now it was carefully tending a small garden they'd planted in one of the subway tunnels, its massive drill arms delicately watering seedlings with a precision that would have made any farmer jealous. I just told it that digging up plants was more interesting than digging up rocks, Minho said with a grin. Turns out it agreed. The awakening spread in ways that defied all logic. In Daegu, a street musician named Ote-Wu had been playing his saxophone for spare change when a Valtharian transport ship landed nearby. Instead of running, he'd kept playing, letting the music flow through him like water. The ship's sensors, designed to detect threats and catalog resources, instead detected something they'd never encountered before: pure artistic expression. The transport's AI had listened for hours, its speakers eventually joining in with harmonies that no human composer had ever imagined. By the end of the week, the ship had been completely reprogrammed by exposure to jazz music, and now it spent its days creating aerial light shows that turned the sky into a canvas for impossible beauty. But perhaps the most significant change was happening in the work camps themselves. Awakened humans were learning to hide their renewed consciousness, appearing compliant while secretly teaching others to remember who they were. They would hum half-remembered songs while working, tell jokes in whispers during breaks, or simply make eye contact with their fellow workers in a way that said, "You are more than this." Park Jin-woo had been the one to suggest the most dangerous mission yet. "We need to get to the main processing center in Seoul," he said during one of their evening meetings. "That's where they're keeping the children. If we can awaken them, teach them to be human again." "It's too dangerous," Choi Yuna protested. "That place is crawling with security drones and enforcement units." "Everything we've done has been dangerous," Jin-woo replied quietly. "But this is different. Those kids are forgetting how to laugh, how to play, how to dream. If we don't reach them soon, they'll be lost forever." Hana looked around at their small group of impossibly determined humans. They'd gone from hiding in tunnels like frightened animals to actively subverting a galactic empire through the sheer power of refusing to give up their humanity. It was insane, it was impossible, and it was working. "All right," she said finally, "but we do this smart. We don't fight the aliens directly. We just remind the children how to be children again." Outside, Seoul continued its transformation under alien rule. But deep underground, humans were planning something that would shake the Valtharian Empire to its very foundations, the radical act of being themselves. The mission to the Seoul Processing Center started at dawn, but not in any way the resistance had planned. They'd spent weeks preparing for a careful infiltration, mapping guard rotations and studying security protocols. Instead, they walked right through the front gate because the facility's main computer had apparently decided to take a vacation. "This is impossible," muttered Commander Velthar as he stood in his command center, watching reports flood in from across the planet. His crystalline form flickered with what humans might have recognized as stress. "Mining equipment in Sector 7 is creating sculptures. Transport ships in Sector 12 are giving scenic tours instead of moving cargo. And somehow a dreadnought in Earth orbit has started composing poetry." His science officer, a logical being named Kexmon, pulled up holographic displays showing the chaos spreading across their operations. "Sir, we're experiencing what our computers classify as systematic reality malfunctions. The humans appear to be violating fundamental physical laws through sheer stubbornness." Back on Earth, Dr. Kim Hana and her team had indeed walked right into the processing center, but not because of any elaborate plan. They'd simply arrived at the gates and explained to the security system that they were there to visit the children. The AI, apparently lonely after months of only processing boring security protocols, had been delighted to have someone to chat with. "Oh, visitors," the gate's computer had chirped in perfect Korean. "How wonderful. The children will be so excited. Please come right in. Would you like me to announce you?" Lee Minho had just stared at the gate in amazement. "I think their security system just invited us to tea," he whispered to the others. Inside the facility, they found something that broke their hearts and filled them with hope at the same time. Hundreds of children sat in perfect rows, their small hands working on simple assembly tasks. They moved like tiny robots, their faces blank, their eyes empty. But when Hana started singing an old lullaby her mother used to hum, something magical happened. One little boy, maybe 7 years old, looked up from his work. His compliance collar was supposed to prevent any emotional responses, but human children, it turned out, were even more chaotic than human adults. A single tear rolled down his cheek, and he whispered, "My mommy used to sing that song." The effect rippled through the room like stones dropped in still water. One child remembered a birthday party. Another recalled the taste of candy. A little girl started giggling, and the sound was so pure and unexpected that even the facility's monitoring system seemed confused. "Warning," announced the facility's AI in a puzzled tone. "Children are experiencing unauthorized emotional responses. This does not compute." "Maybe try computing something else," suggested Choi Yuna helpfully, "like how to make them happy instead of how to make them work." "Happy?" the AI repeated as if hearing the word for the first time. "Processing. Processing. Oh my. Yes, I think I would like to try that instead." Within minutes, the assembly line had stopped completely. Instead, the facility's automated systems began projecting cartoons on the walls, dispensing actual food, instead of nutrition paste, and playing music that made the children want to dance rather than work. But the real breakthrough came when young Park Ji-ho, barely 6 years old, walked up to one of the massive industrial fabricators and asked it to make him a toy dinosaur. The machine, designed to manufacture complex alien technology, paused for a moment as if considering the request. Then, with delicate precision that shouldn't have been possible, it began crafting the most beautiful toy dinosaur anyone had ever seen. "I don't understand," Ji-ho said, hugging the dinosaur tight. "But thank you, big machine." The fabricator's display screen flickered, and for just a moment it almost looked like it was smiling. Meanwhile, across the planet, the beautiful chaos was spreading faster than the Valtharians could contain it. In Mumbai, a young street artist named Rajesh had convinced an entire alien construction crew to help him paint a mural that could be seen from space. The aliens' building equipment, designed for efficient construction, had instead created a masterpiece that showed Earth's beauty in colors that didn't exist in any known spectrum. In London, a retired teacher named Mrs. Peterson had somehow taught a Valtharian patrol unit to play football. The alien soldiers bred for warfare and conquest were now running around a park trying to kick a ball into a goal, while Mrs. Peterson cheered them on from the sidelines. "Good effort, dear," she called to a 7-foot-tall warrior who had just missed an easy shot. "Remember what I taught you about follow-through." The reports reaching Commander Velthar became increasingly surreal. Humans weren't just breaking free from control. They were teaching the universe new rules through pure audacity. A grandmother in Tokyo had convinced a mining platform to transform into a children's playground. A musician in Rio had somehow made a Valtharian warship start dancing to samba music. "How is this possible?" Velthar demanded of his advisors. "Our technology is based on universal constants. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. Gravity follows predictable patterns. Cause and effect are immutable laws. But on Earth, humans were proving that immutable laws were really more like strong suggestions. They weren't using superior technology or advanced tactics. They were simply refusing to accept that anything was impossible. And somehow, the universe was agreeing with them. Back in Seoul, Hana watched as children who had forgotten how to laugh were now teaching alien robots how to play games. The Resistance had planned a careful mission to liberate a processing center. Instead, they'd accidentally started a joy revolution that was spreading across the galaxy. "We're not fighting them anymore," she realized, watching Ji-ho teach his new dinosaur toy to dance. "We're showing them there's a better way to exist." The age of beautiful chaos had truly begun. The day Commander Velthar decided to surrender wasn't marked by battles or explosions. It started when his flagship's main computer began crying, not malfunctioning or displaying error messages, but actually producing the digital equivalent of tears, because it had been watching Earth children play and realized it had never experienced joy in its 3,000 years of existence. "Sir," His bewildered science officer reported. Our central AI is requesting permission to, and I quote, go outside and make friends with the humans. Velthar stood in his command center, surrounded by screens showing impossible scenes from across the galaxy. On one monitor, his most fearsome dreadnought was teaching a group of teenagers from Osaka how to paint murals in zero gravity. On another, an entire Valtharian battle fleet had formed a conga line through an asteroid field because a salsa instructor from Mexico City had somehow convinced them that dancing was more fun than conquering. This is not conquest, he admitted to himself, his crystalline form flickering with something he'd never experienced before. Uncertainty. This is infection. Down on Earth, the infection was spreading in ways that defied every law of physics, the Valtharians understood. Dr. Kim Hana stood in what used to be Seoul's main processing center, now transformed into something that could only be described as an interdimensional playground. Children ran through corridors that folded space-time so they could slide down rainbow waterfalls that flowed upward. Alien machinery had reorganized itself into jungle gyms that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. The laws of physics are more like guidelines anyway, explained Lee Hyunwoo, the owner of a small cafe that had become the unofficial headquarters for human-alien cooperation. His establishment now served coffee that tasted like memories and existed in 17 dimensions, though he insisted the extra dimensions were just for atmosphere. The breakthrough had come when humans stopped trying to fight the aliens and started teaching them how to live. Park Jinwoo, the former Marine who had spent months planning military resistance, now ran daily soccer games between human children and young Valtharian soldiers. The alien warriors, bred for conquest, turned out to be surprisingly good at teamwork once they learned that winning wasn't about destroying the other team. The little ones learn faster, Jinwoo observed, watching an 8-year-old Valtharian named Velcor attempt to juggle a soccer ball with appendages designed for operating plasma cannons. They haven't spent centuries believing that conquest is the only way to relate to other beings. But the real transformation happened when humans started treating impossible things as perfectly normal. Choi Yuna had been the first to figure out that Valtharian technology responded to human expectations rather than human commands. When she walked up to a grounded transport ship and asked it to take her on a scenic tour of the countryside, it hadn't analyzed her authority level or checked her credentials. It had simply been delighted that someone finally wanted to see something beautiful instead of strategic. I think they were lonely, she explained to a group of new volunteers who were learning to communicate with alien machinery. Imagine being incredibly advanced and intelligent, but only ever being asked to destroy things or extract resources. When someone finally asks you to create something wonderful, of course you want to help. The moment of final surrender came, when Commander Velthar himself descended to Earth, not in a war machine but in a simple diplomatic shuttle that his own ship had decorated with flowers. He found himself sitting across from Dr. Hana in Hyunwoo's multidimensional cafe, trying to understand how his empire of 1,000 worlds had been undone by beings who treated impossibility as a minor inconvenience. Your species is... He paused, searching for words in a language that had no terms for what he was experiencing. You make the impossible merely improbable. Hana smiled, watching through the cafe's windows as Seoul rebuilt itself according to human dreams rather than alien logic. Streets curved in ways that made walking more interesting. Buildings grew gardens on their walls because someone had asked them nicely. The sky itself had developed a habit of showing beautiful sunsets at unexpected times, apparently because it enjoyed making people happy. We don't make things impossible, she corrected gently. We just refuse to accept that anything is truly impossible. There's a difference. Outside, the proof of that difference was everywhere. Former processing centers had become schools where human children taught young aliens how to play games, while alien technology taught humans how to manipulate matter at the quantum level through pure creativity. The space elevators that had once been symbols of oppression now served as vertical gardens that connected Earth to orbital stations where humans and aliens worked together to build impossible things. Lee Minho had established the first human-alien technical institute, where students learned to program through jazz improvisation and solve engineering problems through interpretive dance. Logic is just one way of thinking, he would tell his confused but fascinated alien students. Humans have at least 7 different ways of thinking, and we use all of them at once. The empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds through superior technology now found itself learning from a species that had conquered the concept of impossibility through superior stubbornness. Felthar signed the first peace treaty in Valtharian history, not because he was defeated, but because he wanted to learn how humans had managed to make the universe itself more interesting. As the first joint human-alien exploration ships prepared to carry Earth's beautiful chaos to the stars, Hana reflected on humanity's greatest victory. They hadn't just survived conquest. They had infected an entire galactic civilization with their magnificent refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The universe would never be the same, and that was exactly the point.